Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of TBR. I'm George Binns, and this evening we're going to have a discussion about the capital improvements that Beverly is anticipating in the coming years. And to help us understand it, we have with us this evening City Councilor At Large, Hannah Bowen. Welcome, Hannah.
Thanks, George. Good to be here. And
the budget has sort of been published. And right now we're looking at $113,100,000 as proposed capital expenditures. And there's all sorts of things in there, everything from a new fire truck to major renovations on City Hall and the library. The library was the one that hit the papers and got everybody excited. And basically, we're in a situation right now where there's a lot of things that should be done. Mm-hmm. And they're in the category of capital improvements. They're buildings that need to be renovated or lots of stuff. Yeah. So where do you think this is going to end up?
It's a great question. And I think what I'm most excited about is how many people are getting involved in the conversation around budgeting, priorities, how we spend different types of money, and how we keep city infrastructure in good shape while also providing city services at the pace we need. And so I think it's going to be a healthy discussion over the next few months, because you're right, we have a few things in front of the public and in front of the city council to be debating, weighing through, figuring out how we want to move. And there's different pieces to it. So every year there's a budget cycle that the finance department, the mayor's office, the department heads go through. And there are different points in that when the city council sort of has the public discussion about them. So we just hit one of the points when the annual capital expenditure plan came our way. And that's a report that our city charter calls for, that every year there's kind of a public update on where are all of our capital improvement plans. And what that means is all the things that don't fit into the day-to-day maintenance routine, like not just the staffing costs of city departments, but things like the buildings, the roads, big equipment, and the sorts of things that when we make the expense is not really when the thing happens, right? Like it's major renovations to a building that will last us for 50 years. Yeah. But we have to start paying for them at some point. Yeah. And so the planning cycle is to try and not have all those things hit in one year, right? You don't want to be renovating every building in town at the same time. You want to be kind of chipping away at your capital expenditures in a cycle over time so that the roads get repaved on a cycle, buildings get new roofs on a cycle, heavy equipment like fire trucks and some of the more specialized public services vehicles, those get recycled at the end of their lifespan, and they're predictable, right? So they're things that we can see coming, we can plan for, and we can use either kind of one-time unique types of funding for. That might be grants that are available, that might be leveraging state or federal funds that, yes, are also our money, but are sort of managed in a different way and come back to municipalities just for certain types of things that are bigger projects and that have spillover effects beyond just our city. And planning how we borrow and spend to sort of smooth our spending over time. Yeah. Because if we pay for library renovations now, ideally it's like a whole generation that gets to enjoy those benefits before it's time to spend again. So we want to spread out who's paying for that.
Yeah, it's like buying a house. It would be nice to pay cash up front, but
wouldn't that be lovely?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's a little challenging to do. So you got to take them out on mortgage, and sometimes if you're doing repairs on your house, it's the same game. That a brand new roof can cost quite a few bucks.
It's true.
And it gets to the point where you may have to take a short-term loan, or you buy a car, it's another loan. So,
or you plan for those things. And,
Yeah.
and that's, I mean, just like with household finances, the city finances, have to be within our budget year to year because the city only takes in certain types of revenues. There's only so much we can do to raise revenue. It's not like a private business where we can make more widgets. Like, we have to be responsive to needs, and we're limited in the types of revenues we can raise.
Yeah.
So we have sort of an available budget that we can grow here and there. There's policies we can put in place that help us grow that budget, but we have to, in some ways, live within our means and still be investing for the future. So, like with a household budget, you make those plans, and then sometimes things pop up, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it might be in your game plan that the roof's going to last another 5 years, and then a tree falls on it, and you got to do what you have to do in the moment. And I think what I'm most interested in is getting more people involved in, like, what is that 5-year plan, that 10-year plan? Do we all know what it is? Have we all talked through it? Are we prioritizing based on who's living in the city now, who we envision living in the city in the future, what kinds of business and homes we're planning for, and do our plans match that? And then when those interesting, odd, either opportunities or problems pop up, can we say, oh, this is outside of our plan, but necessary for these reasons, so it's going to jump the line.
Yeah,
The tree fell on the roof.
Well, something else doesn't get done.
Yeah, exactly. And talk about what that cost is of something getting pushed down the line.
And part of the issue, too, is in the case of the business example, you said you sell more widgets or you charge more, increase your prices.
Yep.
And if that doesn't work, eventually the business says, that's the end of it. We'll declare bankruptcy and go away.
Yeah. Cities don't generally do that.
The city's going to be here, and you can't walk away from it and give it up. So it's something that's got to be done. And at the same time, you get into some of these issues of what's the priority?
Yep.
And my priority doesn't have to be necessarily yours.
Yeah.
And which is one of the reasons you have 9 people on the council.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're supposed to be bringing different opinions to it. And one of the problems that I see Beverly struggling with is, we'd like to do something, but it's got to be coordinated or paid for by the state. And the classic example is the 2 bridges.
Yeah. Yep.
That it took a year to come up with a set of plans, to come up with a temporary bridge that's going to be 5 years before we see that, and it just goes on and on. And I think this gets to be extremely frustrating. Is why does these things take so long? You get caught up in these different bureaucracies that have veto power over things. Eelgrass especially, so you just can't just close off the river for a couple of years and work on it. So there's a lot of ingredients in it, and yet at the same time, people are expecting the sewers to work and the water to flow and all this kind of stuff. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we have to be realistic about that balancing act. And to me, that's why it's been really nice, especially the last few months, like since this term started. There's been a lot more engagement at our meetings. I've been getting more calls, more emails. The flood of emails about the recent proposal to put lights and stands at the field here at the high school, about the upcoming budget. So we talked about, we have a plan in front of us, sort of the annual update on capital expenditures. We're also about to get the mayor's proposal for the annual operating budget. And that's where we're trying to balance all the pressures on, salaries and those routine year-to-year maintenance and service delivery kind of costs. And that's going to be tight. And so people are already weighing in on that while it's in development, which I think is great, because whether it's a complaint or a suggestion or a question, all of that engagement really strengthens the end result, I think. and means that for something like the field, when I first saw the proposal, I thought, of course, that's a great benefit to young people and all community members to be able to use that public space more time in the day during more parts of the year. And what are the things we need to balance there with neighbors who rightly want to know how traffic and lights and noise will be managed and trash and things like that. Those questions help us actually make a plan for managing those things. And how do the finances work? So that was a good example of one that we've known since the high school was built, was kind of in the pipeline. And this year, some funding became available by not spending it on other things to make it happen this year. In the end, I was happy to be able to support the project and felt like we needed that time to hash it out, hear from everyone, whether they felt like in the moment we're in right now with the funding we have available, this was the highest priority of all of the many things in that plan and on that list. And really being able to have that conversation publicly and fully is so healthy. And then I think makes us all feel more confident about like that investment is worth it.
Well, one of the things that makes that particular issue a little complex is that for years, all the football games were held at Herd Stadium.
Yeah. And still are. There's no plan to immediately change that.
But in the grand scheme of things, it was always planned in somebody's mind that the field outside the school would be eventually the football field and the track and all the rest of that kind of thing. And the lighting issue came up several years ago, and it went down because the abutters were quite concerned about how this is going to be handled.
Yep.
So it gets to be an issue, not only can you afford to do it, but how do you convince the people you're going to do it in a respectable manner?
Yes. Yeah.
And take into consideration they're living there.
Yep.
And every Friday night, they're going to hear about it, or lots of Friday nights.
Yeah, or every Tuesday night if there's a practice. And how do you make sure that, people are benefiting from it and not harmed by what goes
another
in.
issue involved is several years ago they decided the stands were unsafe, so they took them out.
Yeah.
They never put new stands in on the home side.
Yeah.
So it's been camp out on the hill with your blanket routine. So there was a plan in place. Things were being orchestrated to make Herd Stadium less attractive and eventually make it happen here at the high school. Then comes the other question of what's going to happen to Herd Stadium?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that gets to be trouble, and this is, I think, one of the ingredients in the dust up over the library, is what's the whole story?
Yeah.
And you get an update of the capital expenditures every year, but in the case of the library, it went from $3 million 2 years ago to $18 million this year.
Yeah.
And that's sticker shock.
Yeah.
And I think for not only the city council that has to make a decision on this and what happened, but also for the people that are showing up saying, that isn't what you told me. And what else is happening? So this is, I think, one of the ingredients that's coming out of this discussion is there needs to be more transparency and I think a better understanding of actually what are we doing and why are we doing it.
Yeah, and I think there's a tension in government where, I have a lot of respect for and trust in the professionals doing this work day to day.
Yeah.
So, planners and our finance team and every department head, they know the work best. We should defer to their expertise. on that day-to-day stuff. Like, I very much believe in expertise.
Yeah.
And in government, it's not just that, right? It's also how we're including lots of perspectives. It's how we're communicating about things. It's that transparency.
Yeah.
And often, unfortunately, even the very best technical plan and, you know, the right choice from an economic perspective or an environmental perspective or a design perspective, if it's just sprung on people without that engagement, might not be the right fit, or might not be, like, people may not be ready for it.
Yeah.
And so there is this tension of, you know, and it's, I think, part of the value of how the council is organized and what we do is we provide that space to say, okay, as, you know, representatives from across the city who do have to stand in front of the voters every 2 years, we'll try and weigh what we're hearing from the folks with the deeper expertise than we may have, and weighing all the questions and concerns and competing priorities of the city, see where we land and try and make sure projects are, you know, held to that standard. And if there isn't the kind of transparency that we're looking for, it really erodes trust, I think. And people start to say, oh, there might be something else going on here, when usually there's not. There's, you know, but it's natural to feel that way, I think, when you don't feel like you're getting straight answers or the full answer. So it's hard. And I think, you know, even local government, I think, has become, like, people's expectations are different of how they're going to get information. Everyone's on social media and they're hearing things from other communities and from other perspectives in our community. And they want to be part of that conversation. We have to make space for it.
Yeah, if everybody's into fake news.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, it must be fake news.
Yeah.
And
but rather than just, like, write that off, I think we have to engage and say, okay, we're hearing questions about, like, is there a plan for roads? So here's the current plan. If it changes, here's why it's changing.
Yeah.
If it's not, you know, as many miles of road paving as you'd like to see, here's why. Not because of,
well, that's one of the things is trying to work your way through the city website to find things.
Oof, yeah.
It's challenging.
Yeah.
And in getting ready for this discussion is to do some research on the budget and the capital expenditure plan. And it took a lot of time to wade through that stuff. And I'm motivated to do it because I got to be ready to talk to you.
Yeah.
But somebody says, I wonder what's going on. Well, I can't figure it out, so give it up.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that bothered me about the library presentation was eventually I found out, they did a test boring. That's good. But they come up with an answer, well, the quality of the ground is less than ideal.
Yeah, or less ideal than projected before the test boring. That's why you do those tests.
That's why you do a test boring.
Yeah.
But nobody carried it to the next step and said, well, that means we have to drill 3 more holes or 10 more holes, or we have to drill, another couple of 100 feet deeper, or it's going to change the payback period, and they never did calculate a payback period, to my understanding. So, they just drop this on you, and what does it mean? You don't get a clean answer.
And I think for me, part of my frustration with the process was, it's not just that 1 or 2 things changed. Like, there were strategic decisions made along the way of should we include this in the project scope or not? Should we put this part of the project out to bid now or not? Should we change the definition of what the project is or not? And those decisions were made by people who are skilled in that area, know what they're doing, have the city's best interest at heart, but made those decisions without the public knowing the decisions were being made at that time and in that way. And I think, maybe some of the same decisions, if we had seen what the pros and cons of, including the roof or not, needing the ADA upgrades or not, were earlier on in the process. If for example, a appropriation request or loan order request had come to the council, 3 contracts back saying, we're thinking of putting something else out to bid. It's going to require more funding. Here's what that would be for. Here's where we are in the process. The conversation might have gone differently, but sort of making all the decisions, getting up to the point where the project was ready to break ground, made it a little harder to walk back and see where all those decision points were and whether those were the ones we all would have supported or not.
A lot of the justification for some of these decisions probably was accurate.
Yeah.
But if
we just
you don't
didn't know what it was.
you don't know what it is or what it was. And if you get to the point you made earlier that everybody says, well, there must be something wrong with that process, or somebody's doing something they shouldn't be doing, kind of thing. And it's very easy to develop a conspiracy theory, which is...
Yeah, and I think, there are people who will assume the worst no matter what. But they're, I think, generally in the minority. And my experience has been, if I'm able to get an answer for someone or I'm able to walk someone through how I'm thinking about something, generally speaking, they understand. They may not come to the same conclusion I do or agree with me, but they understand and respect sort of how I got there or how the city got there, and are willing to sort of leave it there and move on to the next thing, try and improve something else. They now understand how that process happens. They might follow it the next time. So it's sort of that. My experience has been the more information I share with people, the better the conversation is. Well, even if it makes them a little angry that their road's not going to get paved, to say why, then there's something we can work with.
Well, again, the same question came up on replacing the whole Whitaker Bridge. And I got involved in that. From a technical point of view, that's my business.
Yeah, with your engineer hat on.
And, okay, it seems easy, this is what we ought to do. And so I sent in a suggestion, and eventually came back that what you want to do, we haven't done in many years, and we're not going to do that again. Oh, okay. Now I understand why you made that decision. It's not obvious from the beginning unless you have this extra piece of information that only you, the DOT, has. And we get into a similar situation on lots of other things that one of my pet peeves is, why not extend Dunham Road all the way out to Essex Street instead of talking about this flyover from who knows where to something around the music tent, and which hasn't happened, and they've been talking about that for 18 years. And there's now money in a capital project fund for more studies and more planning on that. But why are we studying the bridge when it seems like it's just extend the road? That's easier. There's probably a reason for it.
I don't know the reasons.
Neither do I. So I start to, well, why not? And you don't get an answer. So I think this is one of the ingredients I think that needs to be developed more, is a better explanation of things, and explain it as though you were really talking to somebody who knew what they're talking about. So it's not just, well, we're the expert, like you started to say, we're the experts, therefore this is the right answer. And
it's more, we're the experts, so here's the evidence we weighed, and here's how we made our decision, and here's the decision. And it's sort of an opportunity to help people understand the complexity of public services and infrastructure as well, and respecting people enough to give them that information and trust them to use it well.
Part of the old business process of you've got to get buy-in. And if you want the taxpayers to keep funding this operation, they have to come up with some sort of confidence that my tax money is being spent intelligently. It's not being wasted. And part of that is just explaining what you're doing, why you're doing it.
Yeah. And it is hard. I mean, I know city employees, certainly city councilors, like we all have lots of demands on our time. We're all trying to juggle things. So it's easy to fall into that, like just dealing with the thing right in front of you. You know I fall behind in my inbox sometimes. I'm like,
yeah.
I got to show up, prepare for this vote. But I think that getting back to people, slowing things down sometimes, having the conversation is part of how government should work. And even though, it's hard to make the time for that, it's also necessary.
Well, that's part of the game because the fact that you have a city council with 9 people on it that has veto rights over how we spend the money.
Yeah.
That's part of the way the process works.
Yeah.
And you can't circumvent the process because everything grinds to a screeching halt.
Yep. And it's why we have public hearings around appropriations, around the budget, the annual operating budget, but also around these kind of one-off transfer requests or loan orders, because not only does the city council need to feel comfortable that we've gotten all the answers, that we can stand behind something, but we have to hear from members of the public before we can make that decision. And so it's nice when people show up to those, or we have some issues that draw more attention than others. But I do feel like lately people have been very, very engaged, really informed, bringing great ideas that maybe hadn't been considered before and now can be because somebody brought it to a meeting.
Well, that's half the game. You got a city of 40,000 plus.
That's a lot of talent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there are some people who know something about just about everything.
Yeah.
Not the same people all the time.
Right, yeah.
But it's good that they eventually come to the meetings and say, hey, did you consider this?
Yeah.
And you may say, wow, gee, that might have been a good idea.
Right. And now we can.
Yeah. No, we considered it and it doesn't work because.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Either way.
Simple as that.
Good.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for dropping by this evening, and we're talking about it. And I think this is going to be an ongoing discussion, so I would appreciate you stop by sometime in the near future and give us an update as to where it's going and how it's going.
Yeah, maybe when we have the full annual budget would be a good time to come back.
Yeah, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, if you have a comment, my email address is at the ends of the credits, and if you would like to spend some time before the camera, we can make room for you here at the table. Thanks again for watching, and stay tuned. We'll be back.